it's just crazy to me. One of the things that I've been addressing like on Twitter is just saying, I tweeted something the other day that said, if you can't as a Christian recognize the connection between these two narratives and reject both of them, then you need to wake up. And the two narratives that I put was, one was that a transgender murderer is not the victim, but 3 dead 9-year-old children and 3 adults also dead are the victims. And then the second statement that I said is that a woman who murders her child in the womb is not a victim, but the dead baby, and I look at this and you see some of the rhetoric already of just, again, that, the real victim, that those 3 dead 9-year-olds, I should have thought about that before they were such bigoted Christians. They drove her to it, or her parents drove her to it, and that's just become so commonplace. This, like somebody does something wrong and they're the victim, and this oppressed and oppressor classes, to where if you're in what society deems as an oppressed minority class, whether it be for sexual orientation, which is a misnomer, or whether it minority ethnicity, or even women who numerically outnumber men, but somehow is still a minority, in any of those ways, if you fall into the minority oppressed class, you're sinless. And evangelical pastors act like this when it comes to preaching on the sins of women, Mother's Day sermons versus Father's Day sermon. And so it really shouldn't be a surprise to us, the way that it's already being spun in the legacy media, this narrative of what happened. What are your thoughts, John?
I think that was an excellent tweet that you put out there. I did see that.
Oh, thanks.
And I would have retweeted if I had a Twitter account that I was still using, but yeah, there's a lot going on right now. I think one of the big debates that I see online is what you just said, whether or not there's 2 victims or 2 groups of victims here, the trans shooter and then the victims of the shooting. And then another debate is whether or not Christians are actually under persecution, and whether in fact, I have in front of me The Independent in the UK, I guess magazine or newspaper, has a headline: GOP lawmakers and far-right figures seize on Nashville shooting to push dangerous anti-trans rhetoric. And same thing in the Washington Post, same thing in the Vanity Fair, same kinds of headlines. So they're trying to prevent Christians from seeing this as targeting, or as something that's against them, that transgender people don't like them. They think that's a far right thing to say that. So that's another interesting facet. And then you even have like a breakdown in circles that we would be familiar with. I think I saw James Lindsay had posted something. I had it in front of me and now I can't find it, but essentially he was trying to say, don't fall into the trap. You might have seen this tweet of,
I saw that.
Seeing, your Christian identity, falling into this like super Christian identity where you're having a bunker mentality and like it's trans versus Christians. And so he was critical of Tucker Carlson. I think actually though, what you said was good. I think what Tucker said, I don't know if you saw his segment. I thought that was really good. That was good analysis, fantastic. Because we all know what's going on far, like not all the details, but we know in general, of course, there's anti-Christian rhetoric, and it's not surprising that would manifest in actions like this. Right.
Well, totally, especially when you think of especially young people, Zoomers, Gen Z, and a lot of their news, being from Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and those being just reshared with commentary, but clips of CNN, and just, the left wing legacy media, or The View, the cuckolding hens on The View, where who was it? It may have been Joy Reid who recently said, they were asking like, what should we do about these people who want to make, women's healthcare rights illegal, making it illegal to have an abortion and murder your child. And she responded by saying, we should murder them. And, they kind of laugh and like, you're just joking, right? And she's just quiet and like looks down and smirks and rolls her eyes.
I haven't seen that. That's like really crazy.
And she doesn't correct it. She doesn't say like, yeah, I'm just kidding. She just like, smirks and rolls her eyes. and they move on, And so my point is, like, one, you have this kind of violent language from the left, and I would say that it's somewhat common place these days. But then not just that, like the commonality of the violent language from the left toward conservatives and Christians, but more so than even that, I think for Gen Z, they're hearing, not actually from the right, but they're hearing the right's position twisted and repackaged from the left, and they're being told that we want to do violence towards them. Now, that's not actually true. Like, honestly, this is probably a bad analogy, but it reminds me of like Hamas, in Israel. Like so I'm, we were talking about this earlier. I'm not a dispensationalist. I'm not a huge fan of the nation state of Israel today. I think that they're incredibly progressive and all these different things. But in terms of, ongoing battles between, Israel and Palestinians, I think if Palestinians said ceasefire, it'd be done. That the vast majority of Israel's weaponry is defensive, the Iron Dome and these kinds of things. You know what I mean? And like, there's one side that continually aggravates, and like one side protects their children in schools, namely Israel. The other side uses children to protect their bombs. And like literally, because they know Israel won't shoot innocents, and so they'll have children lined out in front of places that they don't want Israel to retaliate, because Israel actually has common decency and those kinds of things, and the Palestinians don't. They just don't. And so, all that being said, my point is, like with the left and the right, with conservatives and progressives and these kinds of things, what's happening is like we're not actually firing. I don't see some huge rally where, and if for anybody who said, well, Trump rally, no, that's hyperbole and exaggeration and just downright deceit. You don't see a huge conservative rally where they're saying, let's take up arms and go and kill, trans people. No. Like, we would condemn it. It would immediately be condemned. That is sin. That is wrong. That's grotesque. But you see like Michael Knowles with the Daily Wire, like we should eradicate, and he's so clear. The ideology is either true or it's not. If it's true for adults and it's true for kids. But if transgenderism as an ideology is not true, then it's not true for anyone. Not just only kids shouldn't be chemically castrated, but adults shouldn't either. And we should eradicate transgender people? No, the transgender ideology from every facet of our society, because it's negative and does harm. And he says this at NatCon or whatever, and immediately major publications are saying, Daily Wire, Michael Knowles calls for the eradication of transgender people. And what I'm getting at is, okay, we know that's a lie, but what about the 19-year-old Gen Z transgender person that's their only news source? They think that's real. They think that we are taking up arms. We're not. But they are actually taking up arms because they think we are, and I don't see this going away. Do you?
No, it's not just deception, because I think that is part of it, as you just correctly articulated, but it's also the fact that, well, there's a couple things, but one is that there's a study I just saw it's out of Canada, but transgender and gender diverse students in this study reported higher supports for violent, being radicalized by violence compared to students who identified as women. And then it goes on to different categories, but there's already something about, and I think the theologians can actually figure this out better than anyone in the world who's trying to figure this out. But there's something already violent about becoming transgender in your mind, about starting to lop off organs and change organs. And there's something violent about that. There's something that's negative about concerning the effects of the hormones that you're receiving, which makes you emotionally unstable as well. And so you have that biological element, but you have also that ideological element, sacrificing body parts for an ideology. And some of this is perhaps also a third avenue would be it's just reduced to hatred for the truth. I mean, that's nothing new. That's been around forever. It predated the recent transgender movement. So
Yeah, I mean, Jesus told us the world hates you.
yeah,
Because it hated me first. Like people absolutely hate the truth. Like the one guy who was the embodiment of truth, who only told the truth, who never lied. And the one time in all of history that one guy, namely the second member of the eternal Trinity, God, actually made himself vulnerable and took on flesh and dwelt among us, we loved him and threw a party. No, people killed him. They nailed him to a tree. So I think there's the spiritual element of the hatred for the truth and hatred of God, who is immortal, but his image bearers and ambassadors, even more so. Everyone's his image bearer, Christian or not, but ambassadors, namely Christians, you can't kill God, but you can kill his people. And if you want to stick it to the man, but the man is untouchable, he's immortal, he's invulnerable, invincible, then what do? Well, you kill the messenger. You kill the ones that God deeply cares for, who are like sheep among wolves, who are vulnerable, who are weak, who are touchable and killable. And so there's a spiritual element of it. You're right. Like just to become transgender, there's a physical violence that the person has to be willing to undergo. Then there's the so spiritual, physical, there's the chemical side of it. Like what happens when it's one thing. I mean, our little boys, we have to train them from birth as they grow up. We have to train our young boys that self-control is not effeminate, it's not emasculate, but it is strength. But it is strength that has been harnessed. Self-control is strength under control. But what do you do with a girl that's never had that kind of training because she hasn't really needed it? I'm not saying women don't have, that the fruit of the spirit that is self-control exclusively belongs to the male population and that there's no female equivalency. Of course there is. So hear me in that. But it is different. It is different for a woman to be self-controlled and for a man to be self-controlled. And if a woman who's 19 years old has never had to practice, because there's a discipline. Every man knows we have been practicing, and we're not always conscious of it. A lot of it is subconscious, but we've been trained, and we also have trained ourselves, self-disciplined and practicing. For 36 years now, I have been practicing harnessing my testosterone. And you're a 19-year-old woman who's never had testosterone, not like that, not even close. And all of a sudden, there is an actual drug, a chemical that is being pumped into your veins that is a foreign substance to you. That because it's one thing to learn how to control testosterone when you're 2 and you can only do so much damage, right? When the stakes are lower in terms of your training, your practice, and under the tutelage and the guidance of your parents in the safety of a home and all. But could you imagine like a young boy who I don't know, was put on ice or something like that, and then all of a sudden came out, having gone through puberty, and now he's 19 years old, and he's probably going to be a little wild. And so there's the chemical element, the spiritual element, the physical element, and then there's the social, political element of just you just have constant lies. It's like the media and our politicians working hand in glove in lockstep. Constantly putting fuel and gasoline on the fire and ramping it up. And now we have like a trans day of vengeance. Do you know anything about that, John?
Not a lot. It's kind of, I actually have it pulled up because I was going to talk about it later on my podcast.
Oh, okay. Feel free to save it for yours.
Well, no, I wasn't going to mention anything beyond that. It's announced. That's pretty much it. Like, I don't know many details beyond
but do you know
that.
The date? What's the date?
Let's see if I can find it. I have so many tabs open. I'm not sure off the top of my head what the date for it is. It was floating around all over online though, and people were
maybe you can find it. But if you don't, Christians, like I would urge you.
It was blocked. It was blocked on Twitter when I don't know if you know this, but so the reason I was going to talk about it was because Marjorie Taylor Greene shared it, and then she was suspended for 7 days on Twitter for sharing it.
Wow.
I think some other people were also suspended or they couldn't get into their accounts after sharing. And it had been out there before, not conservative sharing it, but of course, people who are more on the left, and it wasn't banned. And so Twitter's saying that this is because they don't allow violence to be shared. And so they're censoring it, but they're doing more than censoring it. Twitter is shutting down, censoring, and also locking people out of their Twitter accounts if they're conservative and they've shared this. What? So that's a little bit of a controversy right now. I know Elon Musk made things better on Twitter, but it's not 100%. There's still some problems.
Right.
So
wow.
Well, yeah, I don't know what I actually have it right in front of me, and it doesn't even say what date.
If
so
anybody knows
has
what
contact
date it is,
info.
leave it in the comments, because Christians, we need to be aware, not to be aggressive, but to be defensive, to be wise and shrewd and careful. God forbid, I mean, it could all just be a hoax, but these things happen, and so, and I think about, like local churches that, that preach the gospel, that preach the scripture, that preach, male and female, he created them, that God is God and that we are not, that God determines our sex from the womb and our gender is synonymous with our sex. Those kind of, beliefs that, the beliefs that the entire world held for all of human history until 15 minutes ago, those kinds of beliefs are now deemed as radically oppressive, bigoted, hateful beliefs, and it's not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration to say that it does make you, to some degree, a target. There are terrible people in the world who want to kill Christians, and not just in the Middle East, but that is starting to happen here.
Right. And we should expect that. That's going to be the reaction of sinful people when we're a constant reminder of the fact that they're under judgment. Right. And that's what they don't like.